I'm well, thanks, Stan. How are you?
Great stuff. Great stuff. Jikku, welcome to the EDTX vlog. And it's really great to have you on the show this morning. Today, I really wanted to dig into 22Seven, a really fantastic proposition in the South African market that maybe isn't fully understood by everybody. And I'm going to ask you a little bit of history around that, but also just talk about the disruption potential that you see from a personal financial management tool that helps you boss your money like 22Seven. So yeah, let's just get it started. You took over this business from the original founder and the CEO about 4 years ago. So just give me a little bit of history and what you've been up to in the last 4 years at the helm of this organization.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dan. So it's been a huge learning curve from the get-go. When I took over 22Seven in 2017, it was during a bit of a sensitive time for the business. So the original founding team had decided to part ways with the primary shareholder, Old Mutual, and Old Mutual wanted to retain the business in its stable, so retain 22Seven within its stable. Because Old Mutual saw the potential for that company, and so they needed to appoint someone to manage the business during that transition. So when I actually took over the business in 2017, we restructured the company, so we brought the costs down of the company quite significantly because it was operating at a level that was beyond its revenue generating capacity at that time. So it was costing a lot more to run, and it hadn't found a point where it was revenue sustainable. But the Old Mutual saw the value in the technology going forward. And the founders, at the same time, I guess the founders also wanted to pursue something different. So I took over the business. We had to reduce the size of the company back down by about 50%. And that was really to rethink how are we going to reimagine what this business could do with a smaller, more focused team. And at the point, and do we have, and can we get to that point where it's supporting what the shareholder's vision was in terms of how it would support the shareholder, but also can we build a business that is economically sustainable in the long run? And since I took over, they've almost been a couple of, we could talk of them as different phases. There was the rebuilding phase because it wasn't, it's not one of these things where you flick a switch and all of a sudden you've got fewer people. They're all G'd up and they're ready to go and try and figure out the new direction for 22Seven. So that probably took about a year and a half to get right. So to find the right people, we had a transition from the old team to the new team. There were people who stayed, there were people who left. We had to hire new people who had to get familiar with the product and so on. But from about 2019 onwards, we found a very good growth strategy. So we figured out that there's definitely demand for this type of proposition in South Africa, and we started to grow quite phenomenally in 2019. 2019 was by far the best year in 22Seven's history. So 22Seven was founded in 2012. So it's coming on roughly 10 years now, 9 years this year, and maybe 10 years early next year. And so, it was 2019 was the best year in terms of growth, active usage, engagement. And 2020 January was phenomenal, and February was also phenomenal. And then we obviously had the COVID crisis. So from a growth perspective, from an engagement perspective, it's been awesome. We've tried a few different things from a business model point of view, and we're now pivoting. I mean, you're catching me at a time when we're literally at this point pivoting the business once again.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about the thinking around the pivot now and why you think that will give you even more growth, or the business model or the economic model will become a little bit stronger.
Okay. So what we noticed, so if we think about 2019, right? Back in 2017 when I took over, the first phase was let's get the business to a point where it's able to research, right? So, and then in 2019 we discovered we've got a way to grow. There's certainly demand for this, but that was only about engagement. So getting people to come back to 22Seven to sign up for 22Seven. what we needed to solve for was actually revenue or value or economic sustainability. So once people are using the app, how are we actually generating value for 22Seven that allows us to sustain ourselves and keep supporting South Africans in terms of managing their money? And the thing that we hadn't solved for was the revenue generating part of the business, so the economic sustainability. And what hurt us even worse so we were seeing this growth and engagement, but we weren't seeing take up in products and services via the platform. So let me actually talk a little bit about that, because that'll a key business model that we had originally started with was we will build a big enough engaged customer base, and at the right point, because remember, we're showing people all their financial information in one place. So we're showing them their bank accounts, their investments, their credit cards, their rewards accounts, and we're synthesizing that into a way that makes sense to them, that they can understand. And then once they understand that information, they can make smarter money calls going forward. So they can spend more smartly, they pay down their debt more rapidly, they grow their net worth by investing more. So, but the idea is, because we have that information and because we can translate all that disparate information into a way that actually makes sense for them, we can also offer them the right solution at the right time, given their specific needs. And so the original business model was, let's find those right points in time to offer customers products and services, and let's give that to them, and initially the initial products that we were offering were all mutual products, which may have hampered us. But we also recently tried a different model where we said, it could be any home loan from any bank. We're not precious about any home loan. And more recently, the shareholder even, gave us the license to actually go out and partner with any product provider. So we don't necessarily have to only use all mutual products. But what we picked up from that experience, so maybe it was a combination of the fact that the model wasn't working, like there's not enough, we will have to get to a much more significant level of scale in order for that model to work, or it was that combined with COVID, and people are looking for much more familiar sort of safe havens to invest their money or save or insure, things that maybe they're more familiar with, But what we found was that model just wasn't working, or it wasn't working fast enough. We had investments on the platform, we had insurance on the platform, we've had home loans on the platform, and people are using the service. They're using the service to track their spend, and they love it. They'll tell their friends about it. So we're seeing organic growth, but what we're not seeing is that next step, which is I'll take a product or service through 22Seven. It happens. It's certainly happening, but not at the speed that it needed to happen. And in fact, it slowed down a little bit last year as well, because of the lockdown, or because of the whole COVID crisis and people losing jobs and so on. So what we decided to do this year was pivot to a model where there is less, it's less economically sensitive. So move from it is still sensitive. I mean, I guess any business model is sensitive in difficult economic times, but move away from a business to customer model to business to business model. And that means, how do we take the capability that we have, that clearly there's end customer demand for? So when we've proven that there are people out there who want to use this kind of service, that need this kind of service, they want to know what's going on with their money, they want to spend smartly, and how can we sell that to other companies that already have customer bases, already have product, are looking for that type of data, but haven't been able to wax this kind of a model. So we know because we've been told this by executives from different parts of the industry who've tried this in their own companies and it hasn't succeeded. We know of a big bank, we know of another big insurer that have tried this and it hasn't worked for them. They've actually had to shut those things down. So we know that there's demand for something like this, and they want the data to enable them to give their customers the right products at the right time. So for us, it's great because our fundamental mission is, how do we help people achieve financial freedom? And if we can do that through businesses, that will be great, right? So our new business model that we're pivoting towards is offering up the 22Seven capability to any business that actually wants that capability within their stable. So if they want to add the ability to track, to see all your accounts in one place, track your spend in a way that's, insightful. So nudges and merchant classifications and categories of spend will allow businesses to do that using our capability, and we'll charge the businesses. So we're not now dependent on selling products and services to end customers. We're selling a service which is supporting our mission, which is enabling a business achieve, the outcomes that they want to achieve.
Yeah.
And then there's sort of an ancillary benefit off the back of that, right? So we also see the benefit in generating what's called aggregated insights, right? So and it has, those things have there are two roles that aggregated insights play, right? On the one hand, when you have a bigger volume of data, you improve the quality of the service itself. So the quality of the insight, the quality of the categorization, it starts to improve. The more people who are categorizing transactions, the more people from whom we can build sort of industry-wide benchmarking, the better the overall service becomes. The second thing is the aggregated insights also have value in industry. So if you think about consulting firms, market research companies, asset managers, hedge funds, they're all looking for aggregated data. They don't care whether or not Stanley's buying a extra packet of croissants at Woolworths, right? They don't want to market to Stanley. They actually just want to know, how has Woolworths spend changed in the last 6 months? How is clothing and shoe spend changing relative to eating out and takeout spend? Are people canceling their DSTV subscriptions because Netflix has entered the South African market? Have people stopped using Virgin Active because of lockdown? And we have access to all that data, right? Because we're bank agnostic, so we're very spread out across all the banks. We're also, as we scale to all these different business clients, the volume of data of which we can base that insight becomes more and more powerful. We would never sell to the end customers of those particular institutions, but we can use that data in aggregate in order to develop these kinds of insights. And the best part about that is it doesn't affect end customer privacy in any way, because the end customer is none of that data is ever shared. We share Woolworths spend went up by 20%, none of the underlying information. So we think that there's value there, and I know for a fact, because the person who's leading that business has been in the portfolio management industry for 15 years and investment research industry. We know that this is disruptive from an investment research perspective, because nothing like this exists in the industry, and it's really going to change the game in terms of tangible market research based on real spending data. And the banks are not set up that way.
No, I really like that, and I think that it is that B2B to C model eventually is quite disruptive. And you actually touched on 2 points that I wanted to really spend maybe 5 minutes to close off this interview on. And it's the disruption potential of the 22Seven proposition. You've spoken about one aspect, which is scale. At some stage, even in the B2B to C model, you may end up at a place where you have enough scale and you're able to really start using the platform as a marketplace for other service providers, right, or other product providers. And then on the other side, you mentioned this brand aspect. So how especially in the retail market, you're going to need to get a brand that people are familiar with for you to gain that scale. So let's just talk a little bit about the scale barriers that you've had to contend with so far. And I think also being in a more insurance or financial services and investment stable versus, let's say, if you had been under a banking stable or even another stable, maybe the telecoms industry or somewhere else.
Okay, so I think the barriers to scale. So one of the biggest barriers to scale for us today is trust, right? End customer. I don't think so much the industry vertical within which we are in, right? So I think that whether we were at the existing shareholder or part of another bank I think we may have still suffered the similar challenges. Maybe a bank, maybe less so, but I think very similar challenges in terms of trust, because the way we're able to collect data today um, unfortunately requires that we ask end customers to enter credentials at 22Seven. And that's because in South Africa we don't have, unlike Europe, and even in the US where it's market driven, we don't have this awareness of I have the power to share my data with who I want to. In the US, Stan, it's market driven. In the UK and Europe, it's regulatory driven, and so people are very familiar with, oh, okay, I can actually share my data with third parties, and I'll get value from sharing my data. Whereas in South Africa, regardless of any single provider, there's a lot of fear mongering around sharing your data. Your data belongs. In fact, there was a time here, and I think also globally, where people said data belongs to the banks or the insurers, and they must decide who your data goes to. And that's changing now with industry legislation and market. So for us, the biggest barrier today is trust and overcoming that trust, that trust barrier. And that's why it makes sense for us to pursue this model where we're offering the capability to third parties, who want to offer money management within their own services, because within their own secure digital platforms, because that way those customers already trust that brand, are already logging into that brand and providing their credentials. They've got products, they've given money to those brands, and so because they've already taken that leap of trusting that particular brand with their money, there's a very high chance that they'll take another leap and say, okay, I'll enter my credentials for my bank account with you because I've already given you. So we believe we can overcome that trust barrier by starting to scale the business in a white labeled fashion. Those businesses, the business heads, know that we are secure. Those business heads know that what we do is great. It's the end customer education piece that's going to take us way too long to solve. So that's what we're trying to do now, in terms of the different business model.
Cool. I mean, I think a last question is an interesting one, because we know it's not just about money, but if you had to, either through your current shareholder or through a new shareholding agreement, have all of the money in the world to take 22Seven and conquer the world, not even the South African market, tell me what or how you would approach that disruption, to really use this very valued functionality, not only from an investment perspective, but also from an end client demand perspective. How would you use this space where people can start managing and understanding their finances to really take over, let's say, financial services, or even broader than that? What would you do if I gave you all of the money?
Yeah, sure. So if we had more money, right, what I would be doing is, there's two things. So one, because I really believe in the business model that we've chosen right now. There are, the two verticals. We focus on the two verticals. The one is, how do we scale up our ability to support businesses in terms of money management capability. We have a dependency on data collection today. So we use a data partner to collect the data. And what I would do is actually start to build something that's fit for purpose for South Africa, and in time, the rest of Africa. And I'll get to the second part of like what I would use the money for just now, because I've already touched on that with the rest of Africa statement. But I would want us to build a much more localized version of data collection with our team. And today we rely on a third-party partner that's US dollar costed, which is quite pricey and can potentially hold us back. So I would build up a bigger team to start building out that data aggregation piece, because today our primary value add is in data enrichment. We take the raw data. We can switch out any data partner for any third party, but we enrich the data, and that's where the real intelligence lies. That's all proprietary to our business. So I would go deeper and say, how do we build a data aggregation system that allows us to take control over that data collection part of it as well, and do it in a way that's much more fit for purpose for our country and our continent? Okay, so that would be the first vertical I'll grow some depth in. The second place I'll grow depth in is in terms of our data capability. So we built up a strong data team in the last couple of years. It's basically now 4 men strong, so it's definitely got potential to be bigger. All masters in data related or statistics related initiatives. The guy who's looking after the business is like I said, he's got 15 years worth of experience in portfolio management and investment research, and he's also got quite a sophisticated background academically. And so between that team, we're able to develop data models and extract insights that are of value. But now it's about applying that to the relevant industry. So I would grow that data competence to double down on how do we make sure we're communicating the right type of thematic reports, research reports, looking for additional data sources that we can then combine with the insights that we're providing. So I would double down on that model from a depth point of view in order to, because I really believe in the model, right? We know, because it's quite credible, the research that these guys are using today to make these investment management decisions is based on wafer thin type insight. They have anecdotal interviews with senior management. They're looking at historic sort of financial reports, and they're trying to make head or tails of what that is in order to decide where the company is going. So it's anecdotal interviews and historic research. The banks today are not set up from a data model perspective, and they don't have, I mean, this is obviously not a core business for them. They don't want to build out a business in how do we take the data that we have. They want to hold the data, as is the case in many industries. Everybody wants to hoard the data for themselves, right? And if we have access to the data and we can develop those insights with a team that's actually able to not only build out these models, but then extract that to applicable kind of reporting, that can be really valuable. So if I had more money, I'd grow depth in those two areas. And then this, the second or the third theme would be scale. I think that in Africa, there is no current company that is at the level of sort of maturity that we're at. And if we don't actually take the opportunity now to start scaling our business so we can expand to countries like Kenya and Nigeria, and potentially, countries like Zimbabwe, maybe, there's somebody else that will take that from us. So I would say if I had all the money in the world, depth in terms of those two business model areas that we really want to focus on now, and then scaling across the continent so we can start to build a bit of a foothold in other parts of the continent. Because the likes of, our data partner, who's a US-based company, they're not building for Africa. Africa is a tertiary market for them. They've actually started to, focus more of their interests in Europe and Australia and the US. So, we can see the gap, and there's certainly an opportunity for us to take control of that.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's pretty exciting, actually. And I think that second business model that you're exploring is one that, when I was working a little bit closer with you 3 years ago, maybe wasn't as crisp. So to hear that potential is really, really exciting. But yeah, thanks so much for the time you've given us this morning, Jikku, and wishing you all the best as you pivot your business and look for that much needed scale that you mentioned. Awesome. Cheers.
Thanks, man.